Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of another crab's treasure. So for those not across it, I do overviews and reviews pretty much daily on the channel. So when it's an overview, it's just looking at the first 2 hours of the game, that being the Steam refund window. Steam reckons you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in 2 hours. And I tend to agree. Broadly speaking, I would say 20 hours in, you're not going to change your mind about a game 2 hours in. So this allows me to do a bit of a soft triage, a short punchy video under 10 minutes, put it on your radar if maybe it's something you're interested in, and it helps me figure out what I will and won't review going forward with the hours that I have left to me. So what do I think? So far, I think it's very cool. It is definitely a Souls-like, in case you haven't picked that up, though the aesthetic and setting is very unusual. I did think to myself, there's kind of two ways that you have derivative Souls works. So I'm not saying like From Software sequels, because they're all pretty close to each other. Even Elden Ring, like, you know, broadly speaking, they do build very heavily upon their previous foundation, which is fine. Honestly, if you're going to be a sequel factory, that's what you should do. But generally speaking, when you have another company, another third party trying to do a Souls-like, it comes in one or two flavors. It is either incredibly close to the sun, so very, very derivative, maybe with a different aesthetic or style, but uses a lot of the lessons learnt from Souls-like games, or they kind of try and blaze their own trail with their own gimmicks and mechanics, and this is in the latter. This is definitely doing a lot of different stuff built upon the Souls-like foundation, and I kind of appreciate that. Because anyone who is a fan of Souls games first and foremost would probably know, oh, well, look, it's not like I talk to people about this very often. Maybe you disagree, maybe you agree. But I find cracking the code to the game you're playing to be part of the magic of a Souls-like game. Especially when you go back to when we were playing Dark Souls 1 before the massive prominence of guides and pre-release access and internet and all that sort of stuff, where you could kind of play it in isolation and not have anything ruined for you and have to figure out all the secrets yourself. And further to that, as much as it's like trying to find your own build and what works, you know, are you doing staggers, are you doing heavy attacks, light, heavy armor, that sort of thing, finding your rhythm, I would say that the more traditional Souls type games that do lean into essentially, you know, like a spreadsheet simulator of scaling strength with a weapon. This game doesn't actually have weapons from what I understand, like you just have one stock standard. Before you go ooh and turn your nose up, just let me finish my point. I do find that there is a stubbornness inherent with a Souls player once they've got their teeth in and got a taste for it. I'm one and the same as many, like I often play super light builds, dodge heavy, I wear almost no armor, mostly naked, and do things like a one-handed axe, two-handed wielded, right? Very unusual, but it works for me. Very fast, pacey, get right in close to someone and do some ridiculous outsized damage. And I'm sure the same goes for like a lot of magic users or archers, even though they're losers for playing those sort of builds. But I think you understand my point. When you play the new Elden Ring DLC, there's a good chance that you're going to try and force the game to conform to the build that you've done for the last 10 Souls games. That's fine, but what I really appreciate about this game and its ilk, where they try and shake the formula up, is that you have to, even though you kind of subconsciously don't want to, or rail against it rather, you have to relearn what the game wants you to do and how to play it, for better and for worse. Example, in this game you have like a shell mechanic, and it very much wants you to sort of block and potentially counter as you unlock it. I've only really just gotten up to the point where you can unlock counters through a skill tree, but it really wants you to lean into the idea of blocking and trying to outsize the damage that gets done to you into your shell. Your shell has damage and a damage absorption amount as well, and then it'll get smashed. And interestingly, that has a trickle-on effect that shakes the whole game up. That you can choose like different shells, like the Coke can is kind of the standard medium weight one, but that's the other thing, like your weight limit is dictated by the shell you're wearing, and the shell you're wearing is kind of dictated by the environment that you're in, so you can't really marry yourself to a build too closely. However, generally speaking, shells are fairly common common, but like, again, I'm already trying to gravitate to sort of a lighter build, so I was putting on like a bottle cap, but it's very cute. But it is one of those things, the way that the dodge timers work, it is quite deliberate in its animations, and it doesn't, I suppose, to put it this way, if you are like me, and I think a lot of Souls players lean into the iframe dodge timing rather than take block chip damage, you might find that there is a little bit of a learning curve to this, because it seems to me pretty clear that the game kind of wants you to block more and lean into shells. While I'm talking about those mechanics, I might as well continue on. You can upgrade, but you've only got like 5 core stats, and it doesn't really come into like strength scaling or anything like that. You have pretty much attack power and you have magic power. So when you attack, you charge your magic meter and you can fire off 3 shots, and they in turn, the spells, I suppose you could call it, are tied to the shell that you're wearing as well. And they range from, well, like the bottle cap example, you do like a little close uppercut, which sort of ties into the play style that it dictates. It is more dodgy, getting close, fire off a close punch. But the sort of standard middle of the road, you know, Coke can sort of ability is like almost like a minefield that you put up that the enemy walks into. So yeah, it's doing very, very different stuff. I did touch on it that you sort of have this little spork that you picked up and you attack with it, and pretty much the only way that you can dictate the attack damage with that is just by leveling up damage, from what I understand. Attack speed is not really something that you can do much about. Ordinarily in a Souls-like game, the attack speed will be set to the weapon set, but generally speaking, there'll be like 100 different weapons, so you can kind of pick your poison. So again, this game has intentional, deliberate limitations, and it's trying to change your mindset of probably not necessarily being offensive, but making it less about damage augmentation and how you attack and engage, and more how you block and defend. It's cool. It's making my brain think a little bit differently than what I would with a normal Souls, and I'm enjoying it. And again, to go full circle to my initial point, it's like cracking the code. I'm trying to figure out how this game works and wants me to play. But again, I think some people, especially, I think the more hardcore a Souls person you are, the more kind of miffed something like this might make you, because it is forcing you to get out of your shell, as it were, and stop being so stubborn about your builds and how narrow you go about approaching, you know, Dark Souls 7 or whatever. But yeah, so far it's really cool. It's very, very cute. Some moments in the humor and the writing have really made me chuckle a couple of times, and a lot of them have kind of made me roll my eyes a bit. The story is very heavy-handed on tax, right? You haven't paid your taxes, so you got your house repossessed and all that. And like, I would have thought that might have been a one-off joke, but you know, after the 7th reference to the people aren't paying taxes, it makes me roll my eyes. However, it's not necessarily bad. I think it's more that it's just going to come down to personal preference. So it's not browbeating with social commentary or anything like that, but it does fly pretty close to the sun. But like, in the scheme of things, it's not enough to change the fact that I really, really enjoy this game. Other things, you can stick like little barnacles and things like that onto your shell, but if you get de-shelled, like your shell takes hit damage and then you'd have to jump into a new one, then you lose all those bonuses. So it kind of has like some parallels there to Mortal Shell, which is another kind of groovy Souls-like, did something different. A lot of people slept on, I think, because it went epic first. But yeah, all the enemy diversity is really cool. I actually should really harp on this point that the sort of puzzle platforming in this game is front and center. It's actually pretty heavy duty on platforming, and it works really well. You get like a grapple hook to scoot around, almost like Batman in a way, but this is actually one of the best improvements that this game brings to the table, because generally speaking, Souls-like platforming is absolute trash, and it's always the weakest, worst part, and in a way, you get a lot of tension in a Souls-like game because you don't want to die falling off a cliff, because there's a 50-50 chance you're going to jank out because the game usually is just terrible at platforming. This almost feels like it's its own genre, almost like adventure Souls-like, because there is a floaty jumpness to it, but it's actually quite comfortable. It feels really good doing all the puzzle platforming, and the game knows it in its design as well. So there's quite a lot more platforming that pushes this closer to like a Mario 64. There's a deep reference, but I think you sort of get my point, like a 3D Mario type platforming experience with Souls-like mechanics in there. So it's a cool mashup and it works really, really well. Anyway, I'm quite impressed. I think this is a really cool game. I do wonder about replayability versus price point, being that because they have stripped out, weapon builds, and in fact there's a lot of build limitations are pretty heavy. Again, you can pick your shell, but your shell's only going to last so long until it smashes, and then you're at the mercy of the game's environment. So your ability to create builds is actually kind of limited here. So I do wonder if, because I know a lot of people that would play a Souls-like game would probably play it on repeat multiple times. I don't know if that's going to happen with this game. Anyway, so look, that's just my overview. I don't need to waffle. I'm enjoying it. I might review it. Team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.